Hey, what's up, everybody? Uh, Glad to be on. I'm gonna try to do this like every Wednesday and Friday if possible, and I'm gonna be hosting the show along with Brian Ballard. We're gonna do this together, and basically, it's what we're gonna do is we're just gonna continue doing these discussions and debates and things like that. It's kind of just a place where everybody can get together from the different social media groups that I'm with. We can all get together and do something live, which is like conversating about epistemology, philosophy, science, religion, just little interesting conversations. It's kind of like just a place for that, not really focus so much on trying to build anything great out of it at this point yet. We're going to see how that goes, but at least wanted to put something together that would be a place to come talk about these things. I'll kind of leave it like an open forum. So in the comment section, you can see the link where you can just click on the link if you want to call in and join the conversation. You know what I mean? And yeah, the conversation is always going to be about religion, what you believe, and why you believe it. Um, UFOs, UAPs, conspiracy theories, spirituality, just anything weird, anything off the wall, anything that really gets into what you believe and why you believe it. That's kind of what I'm more interested in, the why behind it. If something's true, I don't think you necessarily believe it in the sense that I'm talking about. So things like UFOs, ghosts, religions, philosophies, worldviews. These can all be, products of, our psychology and our emotional wants and desires and how we kind of want to build our reality out for ourselves, right? That's what these concepts do. But they don't necessarily, in my opinion, reflect, fundamental reality in any kind of way like that. You know what I mean? So that's what we do is we talk about it and we talk about this stuff and we have fun doing it. And here in a minute, Brian will be joining us. And we'll start looking at some videos. I've kind of been interested in this whole UAP stuff. I've always been kind of interested in UFOs and UAPs and stuff like that as a kid. So I've always had this sort of want these things to be true, like UFOs and things like that. So as someone who wants to be skeptical too, I challenge myself on why would I believe these things to be true, right? But, things have been coming out in the news lately that test our credulity. And we can kind of discuss that with Brian. I don't know if he's a big UAP believer or what have you. And we can talk about other things. If people want to join the stream and talk about religion or talk about politics or other sort of worldviews, you're more than welcome to join in. That's what it's here for, is for everybody to jump in on the conversation. It's just a hangout spot. This is my hangout, man. And you're more than welcome. I just want you to keep it cordial, keep it respectful, like anywhere else. You're in my living room. So please, just have respect and be interesting, you know, and don't be a dumbass. Okay. Don't fucking be stupid. Don't have time for that shit. Nobody wants stupid shit. Just be smart, be intelligent, make sense, and we can have a great conversation. You know what I mean? So I'm looking forward to it, man. Just dial in whenever you're ready, whenever you can. In the meantime, we have some guests coming in the background. I'll be putting them backstage. My girl Sophia will be here, hopefully, she says, and other folks jump in the background as well, and we can all have a nice little get together tonight. and discuss UAPs and religion and politics and epistemology and all that cool kind of stuff. So that would be the thing to do. Now, when it comes to epistemology, if you're not so familiar with that term, a lot of people just aren't. But this has to do with what you believe or how you arrive at knowledge. It's a theory of knowing stuff. Like how do you know things? How do you know your beliefs are true, for example? Um, and so that's always interesting because a lot of people find out new things about themselves that they weren't really aware of. If you dig hard enough and ask the right questions, you can kind of get at the root reasons for why people believe what they do. And a lot of people, and part of it is to create a little doubt in that case. Once you find out you're not really sure why you believe certain things, then it opens the door for a little skepticism, and that's what we do. Anyway, we've got Brian with us. What's going on, Mr. Ballard?
Hey, how you doing, Scott? Doing good today.
I'm hanging in, man.
Sweet,
I was
sweet.
just talking a little bit about how we're gonna do the show. Pretty much just keep it like a open format. We can just discuss things and talk about different things, and we'll keep it open for people to join in the stream so they can call in. We got some people interested in calling in tonight. In fact, they'll be calling in a little bit. But yeah, so I'm looking forward to doing the first thing. This is Brian Ballard. You'll be my host here, my
Okay.
co-host or what have you.
Sidekick.
Um, yeah, my sidekick, and we pretty much agree on a lot of the same things and sort of have the same skeptical outlook on different things. So
Quite a bit.
I thought, yeah, we would be a good little team. I'm sure we have our differences, and that's cool. But hey, that's what it's all about, man. Is making life interesting and learning how other people view reality. How do we all view things? Is a very interesting for me, anyways, to know why do people believe? Because I used to be a big Christian believer back in the day.
Yep, me too. Yep.
And when I got out of it, I used to always ask myself, how could I believe this dumb bullshit?
At first
You
I
ever
did.
thought of that?
At first I didn't, but these days it's like how exactly how did I really believe that? And then how do I bring people along to that?
Yeah, yeah. And and I've kind of learned just by being part of different groups around different people with different belief systems and watching how maybe skeptics and unbelievers, maybe atheists will um, conversate. Like, how do you kind of learn how a lot of people or a subset of people usually or generally think about things by the way they respond to certain questions or how they approach certain questions. And so I can see some patterns. Like, one of the things that I see is, and I've always told myself, it's like if I'm going to be a true skeptic, then I have to be consistent in my skepticism. Like, I can't really like cherry pick
Right.
certain things that I want to believe, and then other things I'll be skeptical about, right? Because that would be what a that's by definition a fallacy. So we all can engage in that in different ways. So it's always a challenge to look at your core beliefs. And sometimes people want to be skeptical because they believe in skepticism. They don't necessarily want the truth, is what I've come to kind of realize. Some people they may care about what's true ultimately, but it seems that they care more about their identity than what the truth really is about something, like their ego or something like that. And so you'll see a lot of religious people claim to want to know the truth, but then when presented counterfactuals or some good thought experiments to kind of get them to question and get out of their little bubble, um, there'll be a lot of resistance and just a lot of outright you know, running away. But I see that also on the other side too. There's a lot of folks that are not arguing properly because and you can tell what this tells me is when these people can't really argue properly for why atheism, that means that they don't really care about the arguments or the truth or the way that they have arrived at their epistemology. They care more about just being right,
You see
being
that a lot.
against, yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
I mean, the foundation of skepticism is to be skeptical of skepticism.
Hmm.
And like if I get somebody puts a fact on me that I think, hey man, that sounds good. I like that. I agree with that. The first thing I do is try to find out opposition against it.
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
know, let me see what the other side is saying. Let me try to disprove this. And that, everybody should be doing that. But I
Yeah.
run across, and I would say more, of course, both sides, but more on the religious side, people just
Hmm.
arguments that, it could have took you 5 minutes, 2 minutes to Google that and realize
Yeah.
it's wrong. And
Yeah.
some of the same old apologetics. If I hear one more time, if somebody comes on here and talks about chariot wheels in the Red Sea proving
Uh,
Exodus, I'm gonna go ballistic. you know,
I'm telling you, man.
I mean, that was
There's
debunked back in the 80s, and people still come up with it. And it's like,
the
you saw
ark.
that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. The Ron Wyatt stuff, basically,
Yeah.
which even most of the creationists, that's what really gets me about him. Most of the big creationist societies have disavowed him. And you go on like CRI or Answers in Genesis, and they'll tell you right there, they're diplomatic, but
Hmm.
don't take anything what he says, literally or seriously. And still, you go on these, especially these creationist sites, of course, but a lot of the Christian sites too, and people are just, oh yeah, he found the Ark of the Covenant. You know,
Mm.
yeah, I just, you think everybody would have heard about that if it was true.
Yeah. And I kind of feel like there's been a rise in the last, say, 5 to 10 years of different ways of arguing for Christianity in particular, that are aside from the evidentialist sort of arguments, like, we found Noah's Ark, or you know whatever their things are going to be. We
Right.
found out the earth is flat or something like that. It seems like more the more the better arguments now are sort of philosophical, like they really focus in. And that's why a lot of the Christians I speak to don't like to talk about things in terms of evidence. They like to talk
Of
about
course not.
things in terms of philosophy, like the rich philosophical tradition of Christianity. Like they want to go that way with you, because it's
Saint
so.
Saint Augustine and Alvin Plantia, right?
Yeah, yeah, there we go.
Well,
The usual
that's
suspects.
that's the problem. I think you probably saw that thing was you know, God used to live on a mountain until we climbed the mountain and he wasn't there. And then God lived in the air in the sky until we made airplanes and he wasn't there.
Hmm.
And now that we've got spaceships, God's got to be outside of space and time.
Yeah, right. Right.
Right. So then you can stick him outside of space and time and make all these philosophical arguments you want.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's definitely much more popular, which I enjoy those.
Hmm.
The
Yep.
only the only ones I do not enjoy that drive me crazy are the presuppositionalists.
Oh yeah, the
You,
precepts. Yeah.
it's they'll admit they're circular. The Bible is true because the Bible says it's true. The Bible says it's true because it's true.
And
And
you wouldn't know
bam,
anything is true or not
you,
if the Christian God didn't exist.
you'd have to steal from the Christian worldview to argue it.
Yeah, you're
Right?
borrowing from the Christian like, why can't I borrow? Let's say I'm
Actually,
borrowing.
actually, I
What's
saw
wrong with that?
who was that? I don't know if it was one of the big YouTube guys, but that's what he did. He goes, okay, well then I am going to borrow from your worldview. Let's do that, and
Hmm.
then we'll just march on from there.
Yeah,
And
Pine
yeah,
Creek Doug does
yeah,
that.
Pine Creek, that was him. Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
saw one the
I'll
other
borrow from
day.
your worldview.
Yeah, the guy was like, "Well, you can't really say anything without borrowing from my worldview." And it's like, okay, So I'm borrowing from your worldview. Let's keep going with it. Let's see what
Exactly.
happens.
Yeah, that was good.
It doesn't discount anything.
That was
If
good.
anything, it's going to refute you because we're using your premises. you
Exactly.
know, so that's the problem. That's why they really hate when you do that. That internal critique thing, because
Oh yeah.
it's easy to point the finger at you and say, well, you have no basis for knowing what's right and wrong because you don't believe in God. So everything you're saying out of your mouth is arbitrary according to you because you have no primary referent. But say, okay, well, let's go along with yours. You know, it's
Exactly.
wrong to do X, Y, and Z, and it's okay. It is good to do X, Y, and Z. So let's test that out. Let's look for the inconsistency within your scriptures or your worldview. And yeah, it's
Yeah, that
funny.
gets it does get pretty interesting that way.
Yeah, it's like the one you use a lot with this Sai Baba.
Yeah, I
Um,
love that one. But
yes, the outs. Why do you do that? Go ahead and explain. Why do
yeah,
you
I like
like?
it is called the outsider de- technique. I don't know, the outsider
Yeah,
argument.
test of
But
faith. Yeah.
yeah, but all you're really asking them to do is to compare their evidence with the evidence of another religion or another worldview and see if they
Hmm.
can accept it. And as basic as okay, you believe the Bible is true. Uh, the the Mormons believe the Book of Mormons is true. Why do you not
Hmm.
believe their book and you believe yours? And then see if that evidence is consistent or not. And
Hmm.
it's not.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
mean, even the Book of Mormon. That's if we're talking about evidence and things. They've got 8 eyewitnesses to the golden plates.
That's
People
right.
that swore, and they might have even left the church, but they never recanted that they saw the golden plates. They saw the angel, and Christianity doesn't have one eyewitness really.
Right.
Maybe Paul, but so it's like, why do you believe your story is historically accurate and theirs isn't?
Yeah, and the problem with Paul is his was a vision,
Exactly.
and so that can be that opens up. You know, it's kind of like it's so weird. I was looking at a video from what is that channel? I can't even think of the name of the channel, but there's this Christian channel, and they were talking about this whole UFO UAP thing, and they were trying to argue the evidence. Because a
Right.
lot of these Christians are not into UAPs because it goes against their religion. It's not like part of their doctrine.
Yeah, the whole universe was created for the earth
Just
and for
for
humans,
right.
right? So they can't
So
be aliens.
right. So they're talking about debunking all the evidence. And it's like, but you don't realize there's like 1,000 times better evidence for that stuff than Christianity.
Ex-
Like they're talking about all these eyewitnesses can be, yeah, but they're fucking
but they
eyewitnesses.
are eyewitnesses, right?
Like these are
Right.
people that are still alive today. They've written, they've signed their name to their testimony, and they are the eyewitness themselves, and they have credentials and high military credentials or whatever the case may be, right?
Right.
Like there may not be strong evidence for UFOs or UAPs. There may not really be any concrete evidence yet, but there's better evidence.
Much
That's the
better.
whole point. Much better evidence, kind of like the Sai Baba situation. You know,
Yeah, that's the thing. We've got people alive today that will swear to his miracles.
yeah.
We've got hundreds of eyewitness accounts. I think you've heard the one. There's a man. You can go look this up. Rod Sterling narrated it. It's a little documentary about Sai Baba. But the guy that he actually raised from the dead is being interviewed. So you've got
Wow.
his
Okay.
testimony on videotape, because I think this was back in the 70s or so.
Mm-hmm.
But and he does actually seem pretty darn sincere. Nice old gentleman. He swears he died. He went
Mm-hmm.
not to heaven, but he went to a heavenly realm, and he was in front of some celestial judge. And Sai Baba showed up and argued his case for him that he should go back to Earth because his work wasn't done. And
Mm-hmm.
next thing you know, he was back in his body, raised from the dead.
Right.
And it's like, I mean, Christianity has
That's
nothing like
none of
that,
that.
right?
It's nothing like
And
that,
then,
right?
but they just don't seem to see it's like, okay, if they can be so mistaken, can't you be mistaken?
Right.
You know,
Right. They don't get it.
or at least you're admitting that secondhand or even eyewitness testimony is not adequate. You know,
Right.
you don't even have to say Christianity is false, but you're admitting that the Bible's not adequate evidence, at least not the eyewitness or the secondhand testimonies.
Right.
Testimony of a religious group is not adequate evidence for miracles. It's
It's like it would be more convincing to have the enemies of a
oh yeah,
particular party, group, or religious organization come out and talk about some of the claims being true than just the corroborating testimony of believers. I mean, obviously, if an enemy of Christ, like say a Roman, you know, Pontius Pilate, for example, yeah, I saw Jesus, appear to me um, after he was executed, 3 days later or whatever. That would be a lot more compelling than the only people who talk about seeing Jesus are Jesus believers.
exactly. Why didn't Jesus just appear to Pontius Pilate?
Right.
Why didn't he just come back and said, "Yeah, you can't keep me down, dude. Here I am." Uh,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, couldn't do that.
Not at all. Not at all. And
And people don't understand how easy. We start talking about like the old Christianity come from. And
right.
how did they come up with this? And of course, I'm a person. I believe in the historical Jesus. It makes a lot of sense to me that he was an apocalyptic preacher, had a following, got too big for his britches, and got himself killed. And then his followers just decided, hey, he rose from the dead, and went on from there.
Yeah.
And Christians will ask you, like, well, exactly how did that happen? Who exactly started it? Who had what kind of vision? And all of that really doesn't matter because we have so many examples of the exact same thing happening. Then
Right.
you get back to Mormonism. That's a major religion. There's millions of people that believe that.
hmm
And Christians will admit, well, they just made the whole thing up. Well, why don't you think that the early Christians just didn't make it up?
Right.
And when we say make it up, we mean that they are sincerely mistaken. Victor kind of gets on me a lot because I'll say, "Oh, you're just making it up," and he's like, "Well, they wouldn't
hmm
lie," and it's like I don't think they lied. I'm certain they believed it just as much
hmm
as any of these other people did.
Right.
So
And it's not that it can't be possible at all. Like I don't even like when I think of possibility, impossibility, I think of concepts that are contradictory, and so they can't, so they are impossible because it's just contrary. So something like if a God exists, he could raise a son. That's not an impossibility, okay? But it's a big if there. There's a big if on a lot of levels. Not only is it the same God? How do we know that? And then you've got to go. So, but at the end of the day, yeah, you can give it, a percentage of 2 out of 1 billion that it happened.
exactly, and that's
But
that's
that's the
what a
whole
lot of this
point.
is.
Do you believe things that are 2 out of 1 billion? I mean,
Right. And then if you do believe that, then why don't you believe in UFOs or Sata Sai
hmm
Baba?
hmm
There's that a blatant, inconsistency right there. And of course, now one thing, Christians do is then they'll pivot and they'll say, well, you know, my mother was saved from cancer after we prayed for her or
hmm
something. And they'll try to bring, and then, we could go in also even to the, philosophical arguments, who made everything, nothing comes, something doesn't come from nothing,
hmm
but they keep pivoting every time when you start getting down to, well, you're not being consistent here, well, that doesn't really matter because of this, and then you go through that one, well, and so they try to make their cumulative case, and a lot of Christians will tell you, hey, it is a cumulative case,
Yeah.
but if you add 0 and 0 and 0
Yeah.
and
Yeah. It's
zero,
still
you don't have much,
zero.
it's still zero.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
always call it the tire with the broken spokes. It's like
Right.
if none of the spokes work, then still got you a flat tire there, buddy.
Exactly.
You've gotta have something solid with every premise that you're going to present, or as much as
Right.
possible. And the other thing too that can cut down on a lot of inaccuracy and mistakes we make in our thinking is to really think about our epistemology. And part of my own um kind of rule on my epistemology is it's based on making the least amount of assumptions as possible, because the more assumptions you make, that's just more chances you're coming to a wrong conclusion. I mean, it's like I'd rather my car gets serviced and I go on a long trip after a mechanic told me, yeah, I confirmed and verified 100% of your engine. Whereas another guy's like, well, I'm just kind of assuming that most of that's going to be all right. I just check the
Exactly.
tires,
Right.
you know?
That's another thing I think. The precepts, I think that's their biggest problem.
Yeah.
If you get down to it, the foundations of all of our thoughts are pretty darn weak. I mean, we can't defeat solipsism. And
Nope.
we've kind of been through. We could be a brain in a vat. We could be in the matrix. We cannot prove that 100%. But then, if you start with that, then you have to say, well, since I'm already out here making assumptions, I need to make as few assumptions as possible. Because for
Right.
every assumption I make, I'm just getting further and further out into the wilderness, really.
See, this kind of is a perfect segue into this video I wanted to share, a little segment of this video. Um, you can see it okay, so I'll go ahead and play it.
So it's not that we're just sort of imagining everything.
No,
there
no.
is a real external world. And I mean, I don't know what you would say to skeptics on that front who say, all I sort of have is this potentially flawed system of senses that I use to try and investigate the world, and I have no way to know if it's really there. And especially when you say that so much of what we perceive is to do with our brains, what they predict, what they expect to find. And I mean, you say in the book that people might object to a sort of hallucination view of perception by saying, well, if you think it's all a hallucination, go and jump in front of a train and see what happens, right?
Yeah.
And of course, yeah, I mean, do that and you're going to feel a big crash.
Yeah.
No, I should clarify, actually. I did say do that. I don't want to be clipped. But of course, the feeling that you would have being hit by a train is something that equally could be put down to something that your brain is sort of creating or inventing. So I don't know if you have any reason to so confidently assert that actually, no, there is a real sort of set of objects that are in part causing our perceptions.
I think that's just a metaphysical assumption that I make. I don't think you can demonstrate that, right? I mean, it could be that it's true. You can't rule out the possibility that we are all just brains in a vat and our brains are being stimulated in particular ways so that we have the experiences that we have, and there's a very different world out there, or maybe even nothing at all out there. It's just not a very productive way to look at things. The way I feel I'm very pragmatic, or I try to be quite pragmatic as a scientist, and especially at this interface with philosophy. The assumption that things indeed exist, I think, is a very pragmatically useful assumption to make. It helps us it gets us quite far in understanding the world and our relation to it. If we were making the starting assumption that indeed everything is made up in our heads, there's no such thing as objective reality, then it becomes quite challenging to explain how and why we have compatible perceptual experiences of things if there's nothing actually real out there.
Okay, so there is an external world and there are objects and they sort of impress themselves upon our minds. And even though there's no real agency involved here, I open my eyes, there's a microphone in front of me. I don't choose to see this mic. I don't think to myself, I would love for there to be a microphone here. It'd be really convenient for this podcast. And thus there it is. It just sort of appears in front of me. And yet you suggest that at least part of the experience I'm having when I see this microphone is actually my brain making a prediction and mapping something onto the world. What reasons do we have to believe that this is happening when we perceive the world around us?
All sorts of reasons. And I think this is one of the appealing things about it. There's ancestors, this idea that you can find in philosophy, in psychology, even in machine learning, about how this problem of perception might get solved. And just by the way, the fact that we don't experience it as a voluntary act, it's not that I decide to see something. There's actually some interesting subtleties there that, you know, in hypnosis, for example, people can be suggested to have visual experiences purely through suggestion, which means they're sort of engaging volitional acts without even realizing that's what they're doing, and they can indeed have these experiences. But you're right.
Yeah. So that kind of goes to what you were just saying about we could just be a brain in the vat, but that in itself is almost like a motivation to be more skeptical.
Exactly.
Because you know you can't trust what your perceptions are. We've demonstrated that our perceptions can't be trusted. So if that's the case, then it seems that we should try to make the least amount of assumptions as possible. Now, a precept will take that to say, well, that's why the atheistic worldview can never work, because you're admitting that your foundation of knowing is nothing but a perceptual error. So that's where they try to see, that's where you self-refute, you know.
But that's what my response to that always is, well, so are you, buddy. You
Right.
know? You say that the Bible's the true word of God. Well, you don't know that. You could be your brain in the vat.
Right.
You're in the same boat, so you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
That's right.
And that's your big error, you know. But
Well,
if you got 1 second, there is one thing about solipsism that kind of bugs me a little bit, and it goes along to this. I don't know if you ever heard appeal to the stone fallacy.
yeah.
So I think it was Samuel Johnson. This is back, I don't know, 1700 something. And a bishop came out of church, and the bishop was telling him, you know, well, this could all be an illusion. This, you know, you can't defeat solipsism. There's no way you can defeat it. And Dr. Johnson reared back with his leg and kicked a large rock. And he said, I refute it thus.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that's how he refuted it. So in a way, technically, that's an error, because he hasn't really refuted him. That he might be in the matrix thinking he kicked a rock. But the real point I think he was trying to make it was, it really doesn't freaking matter. Every time I kick this rock, it's going to hurt my foot. Every time I kick it, it's going to be a rock. So we have 100% evidence that things around us are real, you know, that we are in the real world acting as agents, and zero evidence that we're in the matrix or a brain in the vat.
Right.
So, you know, you can, like you said, pragmatically just discard that. There's no advantage to even entertaining solipsism other than entertainment.
Yeah, it's just that it doesn't make the problem go away. It's always there. So
Well,
the thing, you
I
know,
think it's that it makes it not a problem. I guess it doesn't go away. I mean, there again, at the end of the day, we could all be in the matrix, but
right.
it doesn't matter one iota, really. I mean, it's interesting to think about, but we'll never, unless it starts glitching, you know,
Yeah.
there's no evidence of such a thing. All the evidence is against it, and we still have to act like we're in the real world.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it's
So to me, it's more of a interesting idea as opposed to a problem.
exactly.
You know,
Now, are you familiar with Donald Hoffman?
not offhand.
All right. So this is what I would like to do. He talks about that in a lot of different things. I'll show you. Well, I'll share a video. Pretty interesting. Second here. All right. I'm going to go ahead and share this just in case you or the audience are not aware. Pretty interesting take on things. We're kind of talking about it literally right now.
Awesome.
Check this out.
As I'm in the midst of applying for residency right now, wish me luck, Grammarly has again been a lifesaver with my application.
You're cheap like me, right?
I love a great mystery, and I'm fast
Oops.
in science, perhaps because it's personal. It's about who we are, and I can't help but be curious. The mystery is this: what is the relationship between your brain and your conscious experiences, such as your experience of the taste of chocolate or the feeling of velvet? Now, this mystery is not new. In 1868, Thomas Huxley wrote, "How it is that anything so remarkable as a state of consciousness comes about as the result of irritating nervous tissue is just as unaccountable as the appearance of the genie when Aladdin rubbed his lamp." Now, Huxley knew that brain activity and conscious experiences are correlated, but he didn't know why. To the science of his day, it was a mystery. In the years since Huxley, science has learned a lot about brain activity, but the relationship between brain activity and conscious experiences is still a mystery. Why? Why have we made so little progress? Well, some experts think that we can't solve this problem because we lack the necessary concepts and intelligence. We don't expect monkeys to solve problems in quantum mechanics, and as it happens, we can't expect our species to solve this problem either. Well, I disagree. I'm more optimistic. I think we've simply made a false assumption. Once we fix it, we just might solve this problem. Today, I'd like to tell you what that assumption is, why it's false, and how to fix it. Let's begin with a question. Do we see reality as it is? I open my eyes, and I have an experience that I describe as a red tomato a meter away.
So I've got to pause this from time to time so we don't get the stream cut. But this kind of reminds me of something Victor was trying to say in y'all's last debate. Remember about consciousness and near-death experience was kind of tied into that.
Right.
But you were more or less going to the brain can create all kinds of illusions and false, impressions, and that's kind of what this guy's saying,
I mean, we know that. I mean, that's the other thing. It's like when you start talking about like things like near-death experiences, or people seeing Jesus, all of a sudden, well, these people were sober-minded. They're looking at reality, and that's not the way humans work.
Right.
And I guess
really
like he's probably going to point out, we don't actually experience reality directly to begin with.
Right. Exactly.
So there's another assumption or another problem that we have to overcome to differentiate imagination from reality.
Yeah, it's a challenge for everybody.
Result, I come to believe that in reality, there's a red tomato a meter away. I then close my eyes, and my experience changes to a gray field. But is it still the case that in reality, there's a red tomato a meter away? I think so. But could I be wrong? Could I be misinterpreting the nature of my perceptions? We have misinterpreted our perceptions before. We used to think the Earth is flat because it looks that way. Pythagoras discovered that we were wrong. Then we thought that the Earth is the unmoving center of the universe, again because it looks that way. Copernicus and Galileo discovered, again, that we were wrong. Galileo then wondered if we might be misinterpreting our experiences in other ways. He wrote, "I think that tastes, odors, colors, and so on reside in consciousness. Hence, if the living creature were removed, all these qualities would be annihilated." Now that's a stunning claim. Could Galileo be right? Could we really be misinterpreting our experiences that badly? What does modern science have to say about this? Well, neuroscientists tell us that about a third of the brain's cortex is engaged in vision. When you simply open your eyes and look about this room, billions of neurons and trillions of synapses are engaged. Now, this is a bit surprising because to the extent that we think about vision at all, we think of it as like a camera that just takes a picture of objective reality as it is. Now, there is a part of vision that's like a camera. The eye has a lens that focuses an image on the back of the eye where there are 130 million photoreceptors.
I'm just waiting for Ken Ham to jump in with an intelligent design argument.
How could the eye evolve?
Yeah, how does this happen? This has got to be a miracle. Nature can't do that.
But the eye is the funniest part. You get people that still say that. How could the eye couldn't evolve? But we
Right.
actually understand exactly how the eye evolved. It's one of the
Hmm.
most documented, parts of evolution. And
Yeah.
people say, "Oh well, the eye could never evolve." Yeah, actually, even
Actually, yeah.
in nature, we can see just about every step of that evolution.
Yep. Yep. It's amazing too how the eye develops over evolutionary stages, man. It's crazy.
So the eye is like a 130 megapixel camera. But that doesn't explain the billions of neurons and trillions of synapses that are engaged in vision. What are these neurons up to? Well, neuroscientists tell us that they're creating in real time all the shapes, objects, colors, and motions that we see. It feels like we're just taking a snapshot of this room the way it is, but in fact, we're constructing everything that we see. We don't construct the whole world at once. We construct what we need in the moment. Now, there are many demonstrations that are quite compelling that we construct what we see. I'll just show you two.
The ancient Egyptians understood that they could use sand.
Yeah. But anyways, that's just the main point right there that you were alluding to. The brain is designed to kind of construct a reality for us based on the information it receives. I mean, that's like, we know that.
Right. And that's, I guess that's part of the problem and part of the solution. We are experiencing an external reality, but not the way it actually is.
Hmm.
It's the way we're constructing it inside our head.
Right. And see, this goes back to what you were saying about we could still just be a brain in a vat at the end of the day. But we also know that, for pragmatic reasons, we just have to move through as if it was real. It's kind of like, you could say reality is sort of like the icons on your desktop computer, right? Like, the icons aren't really what it is. It's not telling you anything about the transistors and the zeros and the ones to compute and process the information from the electrical circuits on down. You don't see any of that. If you want to send an email, you just want to click on the right icon on your screen, compose your email, and send it. If you had to know all the transistors and all the zeros and ones involved in that, you would never send an email.
Exactly. And that's,
So
I think,
maybe nature is doing something like that with consciousness, that is giving us an interface that we use to get things to survive and procreate and all that good stuff, evolve. I don't
exactly.
know.
I think that's where he's going to go next is, we don't reconstruct everything all the time. We're only picking up little pieces of reality because we couldn't handle it all at once.
Right.
Our brain is, what did we say? Billion connections doing 100 trillion computations a second. It's amazing.
Exactly.
But it's
amazing.
still not enough. But it's still not enough to reconstruct everything at once.
Right. Anyways, I'll start this back.
In this example, you see some red discs with bits cut out of them. But if I just rotate the discs a little bit, suddenly you see a 3D cube pop out of the screen. Now the screen, of course, is flat, so the three-dimensional cube that you're experiencing must be your construction. In this next example, you see glowing blue bars with pretty sharp edges moving across a field of dots. In fact, no dots move. All I'm doing from frame to frame is changing the colors of dots from blue to black or black to blue. But when I do this quickly, your visual system creates the glowing blue bars with the sharp edges and the motion. There are many more examples, but these are just two that you construct what you see. But neuroscientists go further. They say that we reconstruct reality. So when I have an experience that I describe as a red tomato, that experience is actually an accurate reconstruction of the properties of a real red tomato that would exist even if I weren't looking. Now, why would neuroscientists say that we don't just construct, we reconstruct? Well, the standard argument given is usually an evolutionary one. Those of our ancestors who saw more accurately had a competitive advantage compared to those who saw less accurately, and therefore they were more likely to pass on their genes. We're the offspring of those who saw more accurately, and so we can be confident that in the normal case, our perceptions are accurate. You see this in the standard textbooks. One textbook says, for example, evolutionarily speaking, vision is useful precisely because it's so accurate. So the idea is that accurate perceptions are fitter perceptions. They give you a survival advantage. Now, is this correct? Is this the right interpretation of evolutionary theory? Well, let's first look at a couple examples in nature. The Australian jewel beetle is dimpled, glossy, and brown. The female is flightless. The male flies, looking, of course, for a hot female. When he finds one, he alights and mates. There's another species in the outback, Homo sapiens. The male of this species has a massive brain that he uses to hunt for cold beer. And when he finds one, he drains it and sometimes throws the bottle into the outback. Now, as it happens, these bottles are dimpled, glossy, and just the right shade of brown to tickle the fancy of these beetles. The males swarm all over the bottles, trying to mate. They lose all interest in the real females. A classic case of the male leaving the female for the bottle. The species almost went extinct. Australia had to change its bottles to save its beetles. Now, the males had successfully found females for thousands, perhaps millions of years. It looked like they saw reality as it is, but apparently not. Evolution had given them a hack. A female is anything dimpled, glossy, and brown. The bigger, the better. Even when crawling all over the bottle, the male couldn't discover his mistake. Now, you might say, beetles, sure. They're very simple creatures, but surely not mammals. Mammals don't rely on tricks. Well, I won't dwell on this, but you get the idea. So this raises an important technical question.
So I can hear precepts.
Right.
Can you hear precepts?
Alvin Planta coming out.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, if that's all true, then how can you say God is not true? You know, what are you basing your if you're saying that evolution gives you, you know, you just blindly muddle along and your brain develops that way, you're not really seeing the truth, then how can you make truth claims like, you know, how can you deny Jesus or some stupid mess, you know?
You know, they always forget they're in the same boat we are.
They're in the same boat.
You know?
Right.
But that's what, you know, Alvin Planta, he's the one that started all that precept. And, you know, and what his argument is your brain was not designed to find truth or to experience reality. Your brain evolves for survival and reproduction.
For
but
fitness,
the part they miss is just what he's saying here. The same thing applies with the brain as the eye. The survival advantage is being able to discern reality.
Right.
You know, whoever discerns reality closer to what reality is more successful.
Mm-hmm.
So our brain is evolving to find truth.
Yeah, it's just a process.
Exactly.
Does natural selection really favor seeing reality as it is? Fortunately, we don't have to wave our hands and guess. Evolution is a mathematically precise theory. We can use the equations of evolution to check this out. We can have various organisms in artificial worlds compete and see which survive and which thrive, which sensory systems are more fit. A key notion in those equations is fitness. Consider this steak. What does this steak do for the fitness of an animal? Well, for a hungry lion looking to eat, it enhances fitness. For a well-fed lion looking to mate, it doesn't enhance fitness. And for a rabbit in any state, it doesn't enhance fitness. So fitness does depend on reality as it is, yes, but also on the organism, its state, and its action. Fitness is not the same thing as reality as it is, and it's fitness and not reality as it is that figures centrally in the equations of evolution. So in my lab, we have run hundreds of thousands of evolutionary game simulations with lots of different randomly chosen worlds and organisms that compete for resources in those worlds. Some of the organisms see all of the reality, others see just part of the reality, and some see none of the reality, only fitness. Who wins? Well, I hate to break it to you, but perception of reality goes extinct. In almost every simulation, organisms that see none of reality but are just tuned to fitness drive to extinction all the organisms that perceive reality as it is. So the bottom line is evolution does not favor vertical or accurate perceptions. Those perceptions of reality go extinct. Now, this is a bit stunning. How can it be that not seeing the world accurately gives us a survival advantage? That is a bit counterintuitive. But remember the jewel beetle. The jewel beetle survived for thousands, perhaps millions of years using simple tricks and hacks. What the equations of evolution are telling us is that all organisms, including us, are in the same boat as the jewel beetle. We do not see reality as it is. We're shaped with tricks and hacks that keep us alive.
Yeah. So that's what I was saying. That's the part that the presuppositionalists will never understand, is that you're also part of that shit.
You're right. You're in the
Yeah.
same boat.
Yeah, you just don't know it, or you don't want to admit it. You think just making shit up is going to change the situation, you know.
Right. I mean, that's and where I get that, the problem is trying to discern reality from imagination. And I really got that from T Jump. That's one of his main
Mhm.
things. And that is the problem. I mean, we're already admitting that we don't really know that we exist independently. We know that we're not experiencing reality exactly the way it is.
Mhm.
So that means we have to be more careful and more
Mhm.
certain, not
Right.
less. We have to, I believe that the Bible's the word of God. Could I be fooling myself? Can
Mhm.
I be mistaken? And you can't say, no, I can't be mistaken because it's true, which is
Yes.
what the precepts do. I
Yeah,
can't be mistaken
circular.
'cause, yeah, I've got the word of God, so I have to be right. Well, how do you know it's the word of God? Well, because it is. And I know it is because I'm right, because it is.
Right.
And you could just go on with all that.
It's like they've given up trying to search for what's true, which what we're saying is you probably will never find what's absolutely, with a
Exactly.
capital T, true, but at least you know what works. And
Exactly.
what, in our experience, our shared experience, we have cause and effect, and that's how we develop language like logic to describe, if this happens, then that's the result, and that's how we reason back on things. We try to get as much data as possible, and we try to form at least I would think that we'd form our beliefs around that data. Now, a lot of people, though, they just form their beliefs because, and I think, it could be argued, though, that we kind of all are susceptible to this, is that we
Yeah, I
all
would
kind
say
of,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
we form our, we form our beliefs based on what we feel. Some emotional component is there, and it could just be the belief in wanting to be right.
Yep.
could be part of it, or it could be I just want to uphold my identity as a Christian over all else and argue to the death on that and die on that hill. And that's how they live their life, you know. And it seems like a person like that would be driven mainly by that emotional need, you know, this neediness.
Yeah, there's a lot to that, and you're right. You're on both sides. We all do that,
Hmm.
and but I don't know. Like you were a Christian for a long time, and I mean, do you remember your deconstruction? I mean,
Hmm.
it it's really difficult to let go of those beliefs, and it
Mm.
really is emotional, and
Hmm.
and it is hard to say, man, I have been wrong my entire life, and
Yeah.
just about everyone I know has been wrong and have told me wrong.
Hmm.
So it is a big emotional situation.
Yeah, and there's ways that we can, like you said, we can be hyper skeptical, where we
Yep.
can we can be people that are just so hell bent on not believing X at any cost that we're going to ignore evidence, you know.
Exactly.
And that's what I also try to be aware of, is that, and sometimes it's confusing because, sometimes, like, you may want to believe certain things to be true. You just want them to be true. The story makes sense. It resonated with me. I've lived with it for a long time. It's now part of my psychological, viewpoint of the world. And so it's not easy to walk away from those beliefs, and that's for everybody. That's for, unbelievers too. There just may be some other thing they believe.
Exactly. I'm trying to think of who it is. There's a gentleman that has, I believe it's called History for Atheists.
Mm,
And I'm going to try to look that up as we go. But, he dispels a lot of atheist myths,
mm-hmm,
and like one of them that was hard, I'm not hard, but I didn't want to let go, is like just the legend of the Library of Alexandria.
mm,
And I've been told it was pretty clear cut case that the Christians were mad about the pagans worshiping there, blah blah blah,
mm-hmm.
and and rioted and burned the place down. But that's not really exactly how it went.
Oh, yeah.
And he goes through several cases, things that where I feel like I've kind of in those cases taken that same road that the Christians have. I've heard it, sounds good, like to believe it, so I don't really go in and investigate it as much as I probably should.
Yeah, it seems to be more about being a skeptic than it is about being an atheist, whatever that might mean or not mean. So, like, for me, I've being an unbeliever for so long, I've gotten to the point where that part, talking about atheism, isn't all that interesting. Like, it's kind of boring, and it's not even that. I don't even understand a lot about, like, you have all these people that talk about atheist movements, like, movements to do what? like, like,
Well,
I mean, I get it.
well, I don't know how
People,
old you are, but um, there's a lot of political motivation for that. you
yeah.
know and especially these days it's nice to be on the internet saying I'm an atheist. you
Oh,
know
yeah.
30 years ago I probably wouldn't have done that. And
Yeah.
when I first deconstructed, it was like it was in a way being gay.
Mm,
I came out to select people for quite a long time, just
hmm.
because of the Christian fundamentalist environment I'm
Yeah.
in. So
Yeah. That's understandable. And that I can see that sort of environment, you know, really affecting you emotionally about the subject of atheism. Like, a lot of, I can see
right.
that. Like, a lot of people, like, I know I was one of them for a while, especially when I first walked away from it. Is then I became angry, like, for being fooled and misled, and it took me a while to realize I sort of misled myself too, because I wanted to kind of believe things. And so, by examining that part, I was able to actually protect myself from falling for it again, in some other form. You know what I mean? Like you
Exactly.
have to know what it was about you that let you become part of something like that mentally. How did you let go of your mind like that and
Exactly.
let other people tell you how you should be thinking and stuff? Like, how did that happen? How did you let that happen? And until I really looked at that part, I didn't really grow. I was just an angry atheist. But after that, I kind of graduated to understand, oh, it's just part of our development. You know, some people are
Right.
just going through that part of their journey in life. And, you know, and people should, just like they did me, skeptics came to me and attacked me. And that's what eventually got me out, because they helped me to see the problem with my thinking.
Yeah. I don't think I was ever attacked, but I same because I think it's a real human situation, and you hear the same kind of stories. I was the same way. You end up you're mad. You're mad at yourself for being a fool. You're mad at
Hmm.
everybody for lying to you. You're mad at wasting all
Hmm.
this time on this stuff, and you want to go out and tell everybody, "Hey, quit."
Right, right,
Stop
right,
this
right,
damn
right.
nonsense. But that's not
Yep.
how it's going to work, and that's
That's that,
probably not
right.
how it should work. And
Mm-mm.
and it was nice to have a community of skeptics that were like, hey,
Yeah.
tone it down, you know, get
And have
okay with
fun.
it, and yeah,
Yeah,
exactly,
have fun with
have
life.
some
Because
peace.
I have fun talking to Christians and on these topics, even atheists, and going back and forth and challenging ideas and stuff. I enjoy it, not because I enjoy the wins or anything. I don't think I've ever won anything, but
Yeah, me either.
I just think that it's fun having the conversation and working it out, with another mind with you that believes the complete opposite, and then kind of understanding the differences, kind of understanding how it works for each person is kind of it's the way you kind of learn about us humanity.
Exactly, and I think that's what I find interesting too is other people's way of thinking more than just their beliefs, and just comparing to see how other people operate, and
Yeah.
yeah,
You know, since I was a kid, the other thing I've always been interested in was UFOs and UAPs and aliens and things like that. Coming up as a kid in the
oh
70s,
sure,
um, looking at Close Encounters, all
X
those
Files,
movies, yeah, X Files, ET, all these kind of movies kind of like sparked my imagination. And so I've always been sort of not too drawn, but always had an attachment to ufology and things of that nature. And what kind of helped me to see it different after I got out of religion is I learned to kind of like be more skeptical minded just on anything, not just religion, but everything. So you could be consistent about it.
exactly.
And the interesting thing though is in recent times, like we've had, like we were talking about earlier, this accumulation of evidence for that far outweigh Christianity.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting to see how this little drama plays out, because right now I'm like very agnostic on it, right? One way or the other. But I do see the points on both sides. So I pulled up another video where, I don't know, I'm a big fan of um Skeptic Magazine, Michael Shermer.
Oh
You
yeah.
know who he is?
Oh yeah. Why people
Yeah.
believe weird things.
Right, right,
Yep.
right.
Yep.
He great book,
Yep.
and he opened my eyes to a lot of things.
Yep.
And so he's given his take and he's interviewing somebody about this, and it's just really interesting. But I just wanted to share this, let you see how this
A
plays
couple of stories.
into
It's been all
epistemology.
over the news, as you know. My guest today is Michael Schellenberger, an investigative journalist who has broken major stories on crime and drug policy, homelessness, Amazon deforestation, rising climate resilience, growing eco anxiety, the U.S. government's role in fracking revolution, climate change and California's fires, and now UFO whistleblowers, which he revealed in his Substack article in the site called Public, which you can find on Substack. He was on the show previously to discuss his book, Apocalypse Never: Why Environmental Alarmism Hurts Us All. And since then, he wrote San Francisco: Why Progressives Ruin Cities. Earlier this year, he worked with Elon Musk, Barry Weiss, and Matt Taibbi on the Twitter files, which revealed the extent to which censorship of unpopular ideas and politically incorrect beliefs was rampant at Twitter before Musk purchased the company. In his public Substack article, Schellenberger revealed what he learned from UFO whistleblowers. He joins me today to discuss. Michael, nice to see you again.
Good to see you, Michael.
All right, let me cue up the story for our listeners who have been abducted by aliens and been on Mars for the last week and missed this whole story.
Nice.
Published in The Debrief, which I'd never heard of before. It's a webzine for science, technology, and defense news. The authors were Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal, who are well-known ufologists who have written about this subject many times, including in the New York Times. For some reason, the New York Times turned this story down. The Washington Post was interested, but needed more time to fact check. Apparently, the whistleblower's name was leaked early, so they wanted to get on this before somebody else did. That whistleblower is David Grush. He is a former intelligence official and whistleblower, and those authors, and I guess today will confirm that he really is. This is not some just hoaxing of us all here. He tells us that the U.S. government and its allies have in their possession intact and partially intact craft of non-human origin, along with dead alien pilots, and they have been secretly studying them for years. There have been many UFO crashes, he says, of many different type of alien ships and even alien beings, the pilots, some of which apparently are malevolent. Maybe he hinted at even having murdered humans. The craft are made of, quote, exotic origin, non-human intelligence, whether extraterrestrial or unknown origin, based on the vehicle morphologies and material science testing and the possession of unique atomic arrangements and radiological signatures. He hints that the aliens might even be multidimensional. They might not just be biological beings coming from some other solar system. Some are huge in size, like the size of a football field. They go back decades, almost a century, to 1933, in which a craft was turned over to the U.S. military in 1944 from Italy, apparently enhanced or appropriated by the Vatican itself. He says that the President of the United States may not even be aware of these sophisticated cover-up programs, and that there might even be treaties amongst the U.S. government and the aliens regarding particularly nuclear weapons. Private contractors have had access to the alien technology and have maybe been back engineering. And these claims were all cleared by the government for Grush to go open publicly about it, which is weird because, and here I'll then turn it over to you, Michael, to give your response. The Pentagon says it has not discovered, I'm quoting the Pentagon statement, it has not discovered any verifiable information to substantiate claims that any programs regarding the possession or reverse engineering of extraterrestrial materials have existed in the past or exist currently, which is really weird since they said they approved Grush going public. So what do you make of all this? And
sounds like science fiction. Sounds like some typical X-Files episode.
You know, the problem with it is that, and with a lot of these quote conspiracy theories, is I would not put it past the U.S. government, right? If they had aliens, they would be hiding them from us.
They should.
They would, and they probably should. But so that part is definitely plausible. You know, I could see if a saucer crashed in Roswell in the 1950s and the government got an alien and a ship, they're going to say it was a weather balloon.
Yeah.
So that part is, but then, you get back to the skepticism. Okay, well, fine. But, we need a little bit more evidence than some.
Yeah, where's the evidence? All we've got is claims,
Claims and,
even though, this is the thing. The source of the claims are legitimate. It doesn't seem like there'd be any obvious motivation because, you can go to prison for doing this, like being a false whistleblower or whatever, and it ruin your career, ruin you personally, unless there's something else I don't know at play, like a book deal or something.
Right.
But I don't know if that's a very smart or if that makes a lot of sense to go through all this trouble. And then he's got like 4 or 5 other high-ranking generals behind him. So there's a lot of good points in the favor, but at the end of the day, as a skeptic, you got to realize that's not evidence, though.
Exactly.
That's not even evidence. Like, but the Bible doesn't even have any of that. That's what I'm saying.
Exactly. It's even less.
It's even less than that, and that's not
bigger,
enough.
It's a bigger claim and
Yep.
less evidence.
Absolutely.
I mean, because aliens are definitely much more possible to
Yeah.
me than a man rising from the dead.
Well, for one thing, aliens are not supernatural.
Exactly.
They're by description, they're natural beings. They're not, these weird contradictory things like omnibenevolent, omnipresent, omnipowerful, and loving, and
Right.
So we've got that going for us. We're talking about something very natural. But anyways, let me hear what Schellenberger is going to respond here. So I haven't watched this
who are
video,
these people you talk? How did you find these people to talk to, or how did they find you?
Yeah, and I should say too, I think that the way my interpretation of that last part is that the Pentagon approved the statements not because they're saying that they're correct or that they agree with them, but that he's not revealing classified information and saying those things. So read into that what you will. My piece is a pretty straight reporting piece. I interviewed several people who are either current or former senior military or intelligence officials, either in government or contractors, who verified the core claim that Grush is making, which is that there are craft that have a non-human origin. My sources say there's at least 12. One person said 12 to 15. These people I found very credible, sane, very intelligent, confirmed that they are in positions to know these things, or at least they could be in positions to know these things, I should say. I interview a lot of crazy people in my work in homelessness. I interview people that talk about aliens that are clearly psychotic. And the experience is very different from talking to these people. I also talk to people on the street that have, in fact, I've recorded interviews with people on the street talking about string theory that are just that are basically part of a kind of babble or word salad, as we say. That was not my experience interviewing these people. These people were afraid to give their names. I also protected them additionally by protecting their genders and by not revealing which agencies or contractors they work for. They told very specific stories that I think are very interesting. I mean, one person told a story saying that there is an effort to reverse engineer these craft, that it's been difficult to do because of the compartmentalization and the stovepiping to prevent scientists and engineers from understanding where the materials are from. And so there was an initiative proposed by a contractor to a major aerospace corporation that was then hotly and somewhat, I think, emotionally rejected by an agency that also this person would not name. There were descriptions of craft. There was one person who did describe the entities, the alleged non-human pilots, but I decided not to write about that because I just felt like you got to draw the line somewhere. I couldn't,
Michael,
I just couldn't quite figure that part out.
But that would be pretty huge.
Yeah.
But that would be even huger than
the other
some
people didn't
unknown
know
craft.
about that part. Yeah, the other people didn't know about that.
So yeah, what do you think about all that stuff?
So the first thing I think is every Christian that watches that should believe that, man.
Yeah.
Right? And he's
They
got
might as well.
witnesses. They're credible. He finds them credible. He's got all these witnesses. These people are sober. They're putting their lives in danger. That's one of the Christians' big things. They should believe that guy.
Yeah, why not? I mean, if you're going to believe the Christianity, yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, it is. I mean, he's not claiming something anywhere near as much, and he's got at least the same evidence.
Yeah.
But
you know what? I think I have a tendency to think that if any of this stuff turned out to be true, and let's say next month we found out all of that shit is true, that we've got alien beings and crap, and that's just part of the new paradigm. I think what Christianity would do is they would just adopt it into their view,
Of course.
as
Yep.
they always do. Every time a paradigm change happens, like with evolution, most of them go along with evolution.
Exactly.
We just happen to talk to these nutcases.
And right. I think that, but I think a lot of them do now. I would say a lot of Christians would say, yeah, there could be aliens. If so, then they're part of God's creation. You know,
Yeah.
the Bible just talks about the earth. It doesn't say about these other ones, but the Bible doesn't talk about a lot of things.
Mhm.
You know, and then, you know, well, like, did Jesus come save them? Did they have their own personal Jesus? And the Christian can say, you know, I don't know.
Well, you know, you've also got these fundamentalists now that actually do believe in the UAPs, but they call them the demons.
Yep.
They're out here trying to persuade the world to not believe in demons and believe in life out in space. You know.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. And,
Yeah, it's like
and, you know, and some of them believe, yeah, some of them really believe, you know, they are demons. Yeah, exactly. And,
yeah, I mean it makes sense, you know, and people will talk about, well, you know, Ezekiel saw a UFO,
right.
you know, and all these, you know, maybe Moses. Yeah, I saw
Right.
something where one guy was saying that, or a lady was saying that Moses, he went away for 40 days and 40 nights, which in biblical, you know, speak, that's just like a long time.
Right.
Right. So it may not have been literally 40 days. It's repeated all through the Bible. That's a magic number or whatever. And so Moses went there, and when he came back down from the mountain, he had the tablets, and his face was, you know, changed, and, you know, he had seen something divine. And so a lot of Christians are saying, yeah, he saw an alien.
Right. Well, you remember Eric von Daniken's Chariot of the Gods?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
now
Chariot of the Gods.
you
Right.
know, yeah, that came out, you know, when I was really young, but I remember reading that as a teenager,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought, wow, you know, that could be, of course, I was still a Christian at the time, but that made a lot of sense, you know.
Yeah, it was ingenious.
It could have been all aliens.
And you know, if it, you know, I read some article, there are some people theorizing, and I'm talking about atheistic scientists, according to this one source, was saying that if it turned out that aliens were true and they had been here for thousands of years, maybe part of what we read about in all the holy texts, as far as some of these things, could be attributed to stories about aliens, you know, or stories about visitations that just got exaggerated in the phone. You know, the phone game
Exactly.
happened, and, you know,
You
then
know,
we turn into religion.
you've got, you know, like you're talking about Ezekiel and that, but, you know, the Hindus have some crazy stuff of,
Hmm.
you know, these aliens flying around in the sky. I mean, they've got some really wild stories.
Yeah,
Maybe it was all
absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I believe it could be true.
My-
If
my-
it was, a much better story than the one the Bible literally
Exactly.
describes. I can tell you that.
You know, really, my only, I guess, objection, or like, I guess, other than there's no physical evidence,
Hmm.
I definitely, you know, it seems like it almost has to be that there are aliens somewhere. You know, this
Yeah.
universe is way too vast. But then that's the problem. It is too vast. I
Yeah.
mean, for some aliens to come here, the first problem is they have to be in the same time we are. I mean, this universe is billions of years old. Civilizations could have came and went without us ever knowing. You know,
Mhm.
in a galaxy far, far away, a long time ago. You know,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and
Well, you
and
know,
then and then
yep.
trying to do the space, like, you know, I just don't think that we can really travel faster than light.
No,
And
no,
it,
no,
and
no, not
yeah,
at all. That's a
and if
big problem. And I was even, you know, watching something today where some people were saying that, you know, if we were to discover these things are real, then where do they come from? And we're talking about, well, they couldn't come from, you know, billions of light years away, because traveling here would be just simply dumb.
it would just take
So,
way too long.
yeah. And so what they're thinking is, a lot of people are saying they could be creatures from under the water, or they could be extra dimensional, like they're right here, but they're just a dimension away, and they figured out, if they're millions of years ahead of us, obviously they'd figure out how to travel without doing it, serially, like just, in a straight, like they think bigger than that,
Right.
kind of like how we think of, it's like putting a Tesla next to a, you know, what, a T100, T1000, first car ever invented. You put that next to a Tesla electric car, it'd be like, whoa,
I mean, and that is the thing. It's I like to not say it's not possible ever. It's
right.
pretty unlikely.
But yeah,
they could do something like that. People talk about folding space.
Well, I also think
Yeah,
about,
well,
I think about how this story could be false. So I would think that maybe this whole thing could be the result of the telephone game.
exactly.
Like maybe what we've got is just an old Russian satellite that crashed, and we're taking that and maybe other similar things, and we're just backwards engineering it. It's a secret project. But as these stories go from one person to another person to another person, it becomes this elaborate story of dead alien bodies and all this outlandish stuff that isn't real at all. So it's probably just very mundane stuff we're talking about, and it's just being blown out of proportion. That could be
Well,
part of it.
I mean, if you really investigate Roswell, you can see that. If I actually went to Roswell. It's really fun, but they do have a good archive there. And if you really look at, you can see that development, like in the newspaper clippings, in any reports. It did start out with, well, somebody thinks something landed. I think one or two soldiers showed up there, and then the story got bigger and bigger. People saw it. There was the whole army was out there. Then it wasn't until much later they started talking about actual alien bodies. You can see the development in that.
The legendizing of it, you even see that with this latest Las Vegas supposed these aliens crashed in these people's backyard,
Right. I've been,
and you've been watching that crap. So then one thing that you've noticed is that legendizing has already started with all these people, taking pictures and creating videos of the alien in the backyard and putting it up there. It's already becoming a signature
big thing.
branding thing. You've got the alien, the broken leg, the big eyes. They're sitting in the tractor. You've seen the one where they have the videos of the eyes blinking in the
I haven't
darkness.
seen that one yet, but I'll have to
Yeah, that's supposed to be them in the tractors. Their eyes are blinking or whatever.
But yeah, I mean, you can see it in real time. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And now that's another one. And I think Victor had brought that one up. Christians like to say, well, legends take a long time to develop. No, they overnight. And what's interesting, it was after that debate, somehow I just ran across something, but that whole claim that it takes long, generations or whatever for legends to develop came from one guy, like back in the 1950s. And he took one case of a slow development, and that's it. That's where that whole thing comes from. And it strikes me just as kind of insane because look how fast this legend is growing.
Yeah.
Elvis wasn't dead for a week when people saw him walking around.
No,
it doesn't take any time at all.
At all. Same with the Tupac thing and all that stuff. Yeah, it's what humans we do. We're storytellers, and we exaggerate and we entertain, and we love to make entertaining stories. And so in our brains, anyways, they are reality constructors, man. They reconstruct reality all the time for us, because anything that we don't know, we like to fill in that blank with something.
Yep.
And we do this in our vision, our hearing, and our thinking. I think when we don't have an answer to something, we like to fill it in with something that makes a great story. I think Michael Shermer said today that the UFO stories that people really believe, the ones that go crazy in the public consciousness, are not the ones that are just factual sighting, like, hey, there was a light here, radar detected it at the same time, you know, pilots saw it, and there's like all this corroborating evidence that happened here. The public's like, who gives a shit?
Right.
But then when it comes to an alien 10 foot tall lands in my backyard and runs around the neighborhood scaring everybody, that's the thing that they believe in and they die on a hill for.
Exactly.
Because,
It's gotta be
and
a
the
good story.
psychologist was saying that, why is that? Why do they act different towards different alien stories? Like, that tells you something about the human brain, you know.
Hey, everybody loves a good story, right? You know, just
Mhm.
like you said, you know.
Yeah. And that's another, you know, data point you want to keep in your mind when you start considering believing things like the Bible and religions, and
You know, and
you know.
that's of course you can see the same thing with a religion, you know, and
Mhm.
exactly that. You know, people had no idea what was going on around them, and they like to tell a good story. And like our, you know, our Christian friends like those logical philosophical arguments, you know,
Mhm.
a
Mm.
great cause, it has to be a contingent or a necessary being, and all the omnis. But that's
Yep.
not how God started. You know,
Not
God,
at all.
right? We started off with spirits of the water and spirits of the trees,
Yeah.
our ancestors, individual gods and goddesses for every little feature, and the whole thing just developed, you
Yeah.
know, and just refined,
Pantheons.
just refined. Yeah, pantheons.
The
You know,
pantheons got reduced to one. Let's just go with the army of hosts,
yeah,
Jehovah, and he's the one. And then even
yeah.
that concept got,
Well,
you
and you
know,
know,
to Elohim, you know.
exactly. Well, you know that Jehovah was a tribal god in the pantheon.
That's
You
right.
know, they say he was, he came from the Mennonites as a volcano god,
Mhm.
which Moses had to go up to the mountain with the fire and smoke everywhere. You
Yep.
know, he was volcano god, and the Canaanites adopted him in their pantheon.
Mhm.
And El is the high god of Canaan,
Mhm.
and so. And there is in the Bible, Christians hate this, but if any Christians listening, look it up. In the Bible, they talk about how El gave inheritance to all his sons in the pantheon, and each
Mhm.
one got a nation. And Yahweh's portion was Israel.
Right.
So he was the God of Israel. Baal was the God of Canaan, and he, in the Bible gave all those around. Well, then the Israelites had him. Of course, they were not totally monotheist for a long time, but that's what they
Mhm.
did. They took him and he elevated him even further until he finally was, the supreme God. But
Yeah.
you can see that in archaeology. You can see that develop.
Throughout the culture in the
Right.
Middle East. Yeah, Joshua Bowen's really good source
Yep.
for that kind of information,
It
man.
really is. Yeah. Yeah. Anybody wants to look that up, look at Joshua Bolin. Who is it? William Deaver. Now
Mm.
he's an older archaeologist, one of the top archaeologists in the country, and I don't even know if he's still alive. Um,
Mhm.
but he was doing this kind of thing back in the 80s. And you just don't hear about that. People just don't talk about that. But
Mm.
they can really, from archaeology, just trace that. And of course,
Right.
the other problem they have is they weren't slaves in Egypt, and there was no exodus or conquest. The
Right.
Israelites
Right.
were
That's fiction.
Canaanites.
Yeah.
They were
Yep.
Canaanites that eventually you know well, really during the Bronze Age collapse, I think is really, they separated and became a separate people. But they were the
Mhm.
Canaanites. They didn't come in there slaughtering everybody, thank God. They just developed from that civilization.
Right. Right. And that's the thing that they don't like to admit, is that
Oh no.
religions all borrow from each other and
Yep.
evolve, and everybody's getting their information um, from some common root, and the Bible ain't it. You know, the Bible is way down the line in the history of humanity. You know, because I think
Exactly.
that we've seen evidence for humanity going, you know, as far as their conceptual thinking, to go back way farther than the original dating of the Bible, the
Oh, yeah.
earliest books. It goes way back, thousands, tens of thousands of
Yeah.
years before that, where people were writing on cave walls and, ceremonies for dead loved ones, all sorts of superstitions being practiced, by early hunter gatherer people. That's like tens of thousands before, the Bible.
Exactly. And then, so that's one argument too, theists like to make as well. God has to be real because everybody believes in religion. I mean, every civilization has a religion, every civilization has their gods and goddesses. But to me, it's just the opposite.
Hmm.
Naturalism explains that so much better. If everybody believed in a God, the same God, that would be one thing. But just the fact that everybody believes all these different things and how it evolves, i- it's just a product of human imagination.
Yeah, yeah. That's really what it is. And that's totally consistent with our understanding of evolution of humans, that our brains have developed, and we have all sorts of type 1 and type 2 errors that work in our favor because we don't perceive reality truly as it is. um we necessarily make shortcuts in our thinking to actually survive, to live to see a better day, like the old story about the wrestling bush. If you think it's some kind of demon or lion back there, you're going to run and get the fuck out of there. But if you hang out and, I don't know, I have no evidence that it's a lion or a demon, I'm going to go check it out. You might just not live. you know, it's not saying that lions and demons were the cause. It's just saying that, by having that mentality of escaping danger, when you perceive certain things, information in the environment, that helps you survive. It helps fitness, but not necessarily ontology.
Exactly. So, what do they call it? Hyperactive agency detection.
That's right. Hyperactive
Exactly.
agency.
We see
Uh-huh.
agency in everything,
Yep.
and that's part of our evolution.
Yep. We're social animals. And, that's part of why what draws us to prayer to God is you want to be in communion with somebody else, something greater than yourself. You want to be part of some, greater
Exactly.
thing, conscious awareness, or just socially, with other minds. You want that. That's why religions are so attractive,
And
and yeah.
that's one area where I think I disagree with a lot of atheists. And like I said, when I deconstructed, I was like an anti-theist. But
Mm.
now, other than arguing online, I don't disparage religion at all. And
Mm-hmm.
as long as it's not harmful, just because it is an evolutionary trait,
Mm-hmm.
it is something that actually, if it's so ubiquitous, okay, so everybody does believe in something. Why is that?
Mm-hmm.
Because we get that comfort, that communion, and we get social structure. Some churches and mega churches are really bad situations, bad places, but there's a lot of small little churches all over, through history even, that build a community and help
Mm-hmm.
tie everybody together. I mean, there's advantages and disadvantages, but I
Yeah.
don't really think that society as a whole has really outgrown religion yet.
Right. Right.
I I,
Obviously.
I think we need a little bit more time before we could give that up.
What do you think it is about people that draws them to religion, or gives religion a practical use for them in their lives?
Well, honestly, I think one of the big things is the belief in life after death.
Mm-hmm.
That and if you start really digging down with some people, that's always what they'll come up to. Well,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to die, and none of this means anything. And
Mm-hmm.
I think the idea not only of yourself living on, but your loved ones.
Mm-hmm.
When somebody dies, it's really a comfort to think, well, they're in a good place now, and when I die, I'm going to be with them again.
Right.
And that's a
Of
real
course.
comfort. And then you also notice, like, atheism, when it comes wherever it comes around, usually it's people like us that are comfortable in our lives, we're happy, You got a
Mm-hmm.
nice family. You know, if you're a starving woman in Africa watching your kids die of dysentery, you know,
Mm-hmm.
religion could be a real useful thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And of course, Christianity is really good about that. You know, when somebody, hey, I was on drugs, you know, I was running around doing this or that, my life was a mess, you know, and I found Jesus, and my life turned around.
Yeah.
You know,
You
so
know, they,
it's got benefits.
I saw some really interesting study. You brought up the lady in Africa. Um, I saw a study one time, this a couple years ago, where they were kind of studying the differences in the Christian habits in different countries, and they were comparing like American Christians to African Christians, and they were like saying, well, what sort of prayers do you usually say each day? And generally what Americans would pray for would be like, oh, to get a good job, you know, that I find my soulmate, um, you know, that I get a raise at work or something like that, you know. Whereas the Christians in Africa would pray for like, I hope we live, you know, get through today
Another day.
and not get killed by some, you know, bandits on the road, because we're supposed to travel from here to there, and there's bandits on the road and we don't want to get killed by the bandits, or some other dire thing like, I hope we get food today, I
Right.
hope we get some rain today, or something very outside of Western thought, you know.
Exactly. And you could see, you know, that has to be some kind of comfort, you know, to think,
Yeah.
hey, at least I've got, you know, I mean, at this point, you know, I can't buy it, but you know, to have that feeling that somebody's there looking after you, protecting you, and if anything else happens, at least it's all going to be good when I'm dead.
Well, you
You
know,
know,
what they kind of concluded was that for everyone to some degree, but especially to the more desperate people, that sort of prayer and religious devotion is kind of like a superpower. Like it charged them to a point where they could actually face a lot of things that they wouldn't normally, people wouldn't generally even bother. They just fucking die.
yeah,
You know,
I can
these
see that.
people actually faced it because of their faith or their beliefs in the religion, but not so much in countries like America where we're only worried about, you know, maybe finding a job or keeping a job or finding a loved one or, you know, something very,
Having having your mother-in-law's cataracts cured,
yes, yeah,
you know, Tim mentioned is, you know,
yeah,
thank you God, and his friends, you know, prayed, and his mother, you know, his suburban housewife had her cataracts suddenly
yeah.
miraculously cured. And he goes, oh, I was wrong all this time.
We lived a
Yeah,
blessed life. Thank you,
right.
God, for this huge home, and thank you for
You know,
this wonderful opportunity. Thank you, I'm an American. Thank
right.
God I'm an American. You know, that's the kind of shit that people here pray about.
Oh man,
Um,
I don't know where you are, but I'm in Texas, man.
yeah, I'm in
And
Florida.
yeah, well, about the
Same
same,
shit.
same, right?
Yep,
And
yep.
but you know, on the other hand, I mean, I've got, you know, most everybody I know are Christians, but they're not fundamentalists, not extremists, and a lot of people I see, you know, where it does give them some comfort.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
know, it
And
really does.
I agree with Pine Creek on this. I think most Christians probably need to go ahead and just stay
Stay Christian.
Christian. Just stay Christian, because for them it makes sense, and it keeps them happy, and it keeps them in a healthy balance with life somehow.
Yeah,
Not many people can handle being an atheist. They can't really. It leads to
it is.
they need direction. These people need leadership in their life where someone tells them what to think, tells them how to feel about morality. These things are not subjective, and it's not your right to have those things. They're not subjective to you. They're objective to us, and we dictate. And people need that, especially like I noticed, like being from the military background.
Yeah,
Um, a lot of military people, the religion that they join are reflective of that. So there's a lot of fundies in military families, because they really like that authoritative. It's just a stronger anchor, you
Yeah,
know.
it's attractive to them. Well, there's a reason why most atheists are liberals or libertarian at best, and Christian fundamentalists are really conservative.
Hmm.
Because of, those people, like you said, they need that authority, I guess. Yeah, I was in the military too, and you would definitely see that. And it was really, and it was kind of the same thing. There were some people there that were like, I'm glad you're in the military, and I hope you stay there. Because
Yeah.
you need somebody to tell you what to do and how to
Yep.
think. You know, So,
That's right. Some people definitely need that, and they appreciate that, and they live for that shit. They love playing their part. They love to be doing their part as a soldier or as a military personnel.
right?
And and these people are religious for some of the same reasons. They
Yeah,
like to be part of God's little army, God's little soldier. Um, and they love that camaraderie. They love that unity. They love that. It's kind of, I always found this kind of ironic. These are the same people that swear they're against communism,
right.
and they're for liberalism. They're like really freedom people. Right to own our guns, right to everything. But then they love to be in these small-minded, controlling environments. It's like
Yeah,
that's what they thrive in. They thrive in that opposite of whatever it is they're
right.
claiming they're for. It's not freedom. I mean, you talk about free will, but you have no free will according to you.
Right, definitely. And I think, now we're really talking more about, like, the fundamentalist,
Hmm.
the white nationalist or the Christian nationalist. I
Yeah.
think your average Christian, you know, that doesn't reflect them. But there's a
Right.
large group, and they're getting bigger, unfortunately. That
Yeah.
really, that to me, fascism is on the rise again, in this Christian white nationalist fascism.
Yeah. Oh
And if I
yeah.
get in trouble for saying that, that's too bad. But that's just what I see happening.
That's what it is,
And
man. And yeah, it's scary. And you just kind of hope that most Americans are not, you know, don't reflect that kind of extremist way of
they
thinking.
don't. They don't. But the problem is, those people kind of have to wake up to the problem.
Yeah,
They
because they run our body politic, unfortunately. Like
yeah,
the extremes, like the Trumpists versus the far left ideological people. It's like those are the ones that are at war on the center stage, instead of the middle ground people having a conversation. You've got these two extremists throwing rocks at each other.
well, the problem with politics is the type of people that are attracted to like running for office and holding a position are probably the people that don't need to be doing that.
Yeah.
A lot of those people are in there just for their own personal power, and a lot of them are in there just to push an extreme agenda. Your average person, we're trying to make a living, do our jobs, hang out with our family.
Hmm.
We're not trying to run things, and unfortunately, it is on both sides kind of the more extreme people that are actually running everything. Yeah.
Those extreme people are highly motivated people.
Hmm. Exactly. Yeah.
Like we
Eh,
need less motivation in this country.
Right.
you
Yeah.
know,
Mount Everest is littered with the dead bodies of motivated people.
highly motivated people. That's right.
Right. No.
All your religious fundies and serial killers and very highly motivated people.
Shoot.
Yeah. Well, look, man, we're going on an hour and a half.
Oh, geez.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, we getting up in the time. I got to get ready to go to bed soon.
All right. Well, I
But
enjoyed the conversation. You think we can attract somebody in here to make some phone calls? And
yeah, we will. It just takes a little time. Part of it is this was all last minute,
that's
but
true.
Sunday's a lot better, and we'll advertise it.
I'll
And
try to spread it around on the groups I'm still active in. Uh, I've been muted on one of the groups, here recently.
Hmm.
But yeah, try to spread some word around. I'd really like to talk to some, like we were saying, it's really interesting to see other people's point of view.
Hmm.
And it's one thing when you're doing it, online and that kind of thing, but to have some conversations are really interesting.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like those debates with Victor, he really, he brought up some stuff that I hadn't really thought of that much, or
Hmm.
or at least I found interesting. It's like, man, you came up with something there,
Yeah, he did. He
and
really came with his
with his A
with his
game.
homework, because
Yeah,
I'm familiar with everything he's talking about, and he didn't really mislead that much. I mean, the thing about the lady that he brought up for the 17 hours, that was a true story. But the thing about her organs, I didn't know about that.
see, I
So
didn't know that, but
he didn't know it either. So I mean,
but that's how that always works. It
yeah.
always works. You will hear a story and it sounds so convincing with these,
Hmm.
near-death experiences. But if you can actually check it out, it always ends up like that. It's not how it
It's
really went.
presented. Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
just like everything else. It's a story that just started developing and getting
Hmm.
bigger and bigger and bigger. And most people don't want to go check out and say, hey, is this true or not?
Right. Right.
You
Right.
know, and
It fits. It's a great
it's
story.
a
It's a
great
beautiful
story.
story.
It's got to be
And
true.
people love a good story, and if it's a good story, it rings true for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
So, well, all right. Well, really enjoyed it, Scott. And yeah, okay, let's do it Sunday.
Yeah, we'll do it Sunday, brother. I'll get some folks together, and we will make it happen.
Sounds good. All
All
right. Take
right,
care, man.
guys. You too, man. Bye bye.